Teil von The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in Minecraft. Grazi, der Ersteller auch schon der ersten 3 Videos, auf die wir hier auf dem Kanal reagiert haben, hat einen 4. Teil veröffentlicht und natürlich schauen wir uns das Ganze hier gemeinsam an. Ich bin leider 1-2 Tage zu spät, weil ich die letzten 2 Tage auf der GG Bavaria Messe war und da einige coole Leute von euch getroffen habe, aber jetzt sind wir ready und ich würde sagen, rein in die Masse wie eine Reitstromattacke. Freunde, let's go, ich freue mich hier rauf. Hol ich übrigens einen Kaffee, ich habe auch einen Eiskaffee.
For the past 12 months, I've been working to build all of Breath of the Wild in Minecraft. And so far, we've completed some fan-favorite locations like Kakariko Village and Zora's Domain. This outlined region includes everything that we've completed thus far.
Und auf was wir auch alle schon gemeinsam hier reagiert haben. Aber natürlich die Credits zum Ersteller unten in der Beschreibung.
But today, I want to knock out the entire bottom right corner of the map.
Natürlich! Ich will einfach den kompletten Süden bauen. Gar kein Problem.
Move out from the Great Plateau, completing the Bridge of Hylia and the Lake Tower as we move deeper into Faron. We'll finish the Zonai Ruins and Lake Floria, where a great dragon looms over the waterfalls.
Geil.
And finally, further to the east, we'll end off with Eventide Island and Lurelin Village. Lurelin? I don't know. Also, at the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you guys my plans for the rest of the series and when I think I can finish the whole map. But enough of all that, let's get started on the Faron region.
Okay, ich glaube aber tatsächlich, dass das ganz gut machbar ist, weil da unten ja einfach wirklich nur viel Natur ist. Und die Grundstruktur der Map hat er ja schon. Das Aufwendige sind ja immer die ganzen Gebäude, die er bauen muss, ne? Die ganzen Strukturen. Und da unten viel unberührte Natur ist, glaube ich, dass man da viel Fläche in kurzer Zeit schaffen kann.
North of the Great Plateau is Lake Hylia with a great bridge crossing the waters. I decided that it would be best to start with the Bridge of Hylia and follow the path as it goes deeper into Faron. After figuring out where each end of the bridge would be, I quickly connected the sides, getting the basic line and structure of the bridge complete, which was more of a pain than you would think it would be. But before I continued structuring the actual bridge, I worked on the gatehouse. Either end has an identical gatehouse with 2 towers on either side, one of them being well known for the spot where Link's cell shading disappears. I used mangrove planks to give the roof a bit of a red tint.
Ich bin ja mittlerweile auch wieder ein bisschen am Minecraft zocken. Ich habe ja sogar gestern mein erstes Skyblock-Video hochgeladen. Aber das ist jetzt mal nicht wichtig, sondern das schräge Bauen in Minecraft wird so unterschätzt. Es ist so komplex. Ich habe so einen Respekt davor, wie man so normale Strukturen einfach in Minecraft schräg baut.
It's a lot more dulled in Breath of the Wild than it is in the Minecraft map, but it's the best match I could find. But nevertheless, I continued to add a lot of the smaller details with the help of one of the new builders, Goat.
Ehrengoat.
After that, it was time to start work on the actual bridge. The Bridge of Hylia has a large spherical point in the middle, but looking at the Breath of the Wild map, you can see that it's actually an octagon, not a circle. Because of the weird angle of the bridge, it was really hard to make it octangular.
Allein einfach nur, weil es schräg alles ist es so schwer zu bauen.
Is that a word, octangular? The design that I came up with does look spherical, but it's technically kind of an octagon. Just take my word for it, okay? After that, I began to work on the large support pillars that hold up the bridge, which were very odd because they had a sort of pointed end, but again, because of the angle of the bridge, it was really hard to make it look right. The design I came up with does look a little bit janky, but it's the best I could get. I tried to space out all the pillars equally, but that proved to be a lot harder than it would seem to be. Without the main support beam in the middle of the bridge, it was very hard to figure out if it was properly spaced out or not. So I went to build that up first.
Boah, man sieht einfach, wie häufig er das baut, wieder wegmacht, wieder baut, wieder wegmacht. Er ist so viel am Rumprobieren, einfach nur damit die Säulen im gleichen Abstand zueinander stehen. Holy shit.
It has a very square design with a bit of an arch in the middle, but overall, designing it was quite a breeze. After that, I tried once more to evenly space out all of the pillars. I did get it right eventually, but it was still very difficult because, I don't know, I'm stupid. But finally, with that very annoying task out of the way, I was able to design the top of the bridge. I added the...
Aber ist es nicht sogar so, dass mindestens eine der Säulen sogar in der Mitte so durchgebrochen ist? Aber ich glaube, das ist auf der anderen
darker
Seite.
Spots on top of each of the pillars, with a line of copper stairs to give a bit of indent to the bridge that connect up all of the dark spots together. I added the fountain and other smaller details in
Stimmt, da
the
ist so ein
center of
Brunnen
the
in der
bridge
Mitte, ne?
before I copy and pasted the finished side of the bridge to the other. Then, as the last task for the Bridge of Hylia, I began to sort of ruinify it as I have with a lot of other builds throughout this project. I tore down pillars, punched holes in the bridge, and
Ja, genau, jetzt macht das kaputt.
mixed in a lot of cobblestone, cracked and mossy stone bricks to make the bridge look very old and worn down. But with that, the Bridge of Hylia was complete.
Krass, sieht die im Originalspiel auch so aus, dass das immer diese kleinen Ovale sind? Natürlich, in Minecraft sieht das immer noch so ein bisschen krasser aus. Ich habe das Originaldesign der Brücke gar nicht mehr so im Kopf. Das sieht ja wirklich aus wie so eine Sinuskurve, wenn ihr wisst, was ich meine.
Across the bridge sits the lake tower, which really does not have much to it. I had to do some minor terraforming to the region and add in some small enemy camps. Apart from that, this whole region south of the bridge does not have much to it. I put in
Genau,
the
das ist das, was ich meinte. Also da unten ist einfach viel unberührte Natur und da muss er nicht viel bauen. Und gerade Schreine, den Stall, die Sheikah Tower, das hat er alles schon vorgefertigt. Das muss er jetzt ja nur noch copy-pasten, ne? Und dadurch kann man, glaube ich, unten sehr viel Fläche auf einmal machen.
And its nearby shrine, which now is a good time to mention, even though all the stables are identical, I do change the wool colors a bit to give each stable its own unique flair. Way far south, close to the shoreline, however, is the Horse God Fountain.
Oh,
Now,
ja,
this is
stimmt.
identical to every other fairy fountain except for its color, so I was able to copy and paste the one that I built near Kakariko Village and change it to a much darker purple. I also added some large mushrooms behind the fountain and some lily pads in the small ponds.
Der Pferdegott ist auch so ein Charakter. Viele sind dem noch nie persönlich begegnet. Ich habe auch erst super spät erfahren, dass es ihn gibt, aber der sieht einfach so geil aus.
Despite the general emptiness of this region, a little further to the east were the first fragments of Zonai ruins. I put in place this small forest which sort of acts as the gateway into Zonai territory. In this forest, the ruins begin, with what appears to be the remnants of some sort of old gateway. There are two large towers on either side, one of them almost completely torn down, with fallen walls that presumably used to stretch much further into the wilderness. Next to one of the Sheikah shrines is a large dragon head. It was pretty challenging to get the head to look right, but luckily it's pretty much exclusive to this area, so we don't ever have to look at it again. There were more similar ruins further down the path, most of it just being the same tower and wall designs in different areas.
Ich muss sagen, da unten, was er gerade baut, sind ja diese Ruinen. Und für mich waren das einfach immer nur irgendwelche random Säulen, die einfach nur irgendwo in der Pampa standen. Also ich habe auch da unten in diesem Dschungel so gar keine Orientierung. Da sind ja auch noch so große Wasserfälle und wie gesagt diese Ruinen und super viele Dschungelbäume und super viele Berge und alles. Ich habe da unten keine Orientierung, so null. Es ist so schlimm.
Southeast of this forest, however, there's a much more open plain with a lot more ruins. There are multiple square structures like the one you're seeing here, the first one I built
Ich
being
weiß
the
das
largest
alles
of
gar
them
nicht
all.
mehr.
This sparse
Hä, sind
woodland
das so
has a
fette
lot of the
Ruinen?
large green towers that you can find all over Hyrule, which I decided to use oxidized copper for. Many of these large structures were built across this area, each of them being more ruined than the last. That pretty much wraps up this region south of Lake Hylia. It sort of just acts as a connecting point between the Faron region and the lake.
LOL. Wie wenig man da einfach tun muss.
The Faron region is home to a densely packed jungle littered with the ruins of the Zonai people. I decided that it would be best to start off with the large jungle trees that cover the entire region. There are two main types of trees in the Faron
Bäume
region,
gebaut.
both of them being very similar. The only main difference between the two is their height. I started off with one of the small trees using stripped jungle wood and packed mud for the trunk. These trees have very thick trunks with large droopy leaves to create the canopy. For the first tree that I built, I had 3 layers of leaves, the bottommost layer drooping down the farthest while the top layer sort of sticks up. Because of the symmetrical design of these trees, I didn't vary the leaves too much, so the biggest difference between all the trees are the trunks. After I made these 3, however, I still had to build large trees, which are pretty much just the same thing, except, well, they're bigger. I did make the trunks for the larger trees darker though, opting for a mixture of jungle wood and mangrove wood instead of the packed mud and stripped jungle wood. I thought that these would take a lot longer to build and that I would really struggle to make them look right, but I honestly kinda nailed it on my first attempt and I really love how these trees turned out.
Die Bäume sehen echt geil aus, muss man wirklich sagen.
Moving down below, it was time to move our way up the dragon-shaped river, building our way towards the Spring of Courage where the large dragon head rests. There are a lot of ruins.
Da ist so ein riesiger, versteinerter Drachenkopf. Boah, ich sag's euch, ne? Ich habe keinen Plan mehr, was... Dieser Dschungel ist für mich nur der Ort, wo man diese Maxi-Duriane bekommt und wo der Drache spawnt und man in der Randomizer super viele Truhen an einem Ort bekommt. Das sind, glaube ich, bis zu 10 oder 12 Truhen an einem Ort.
In this area. For this region, I decided to put in all of the trees last instead of at the beginning. I figured that it would be easier to build all of the ruins without the massive jungle trees in the way. Plus, it makes it easier for you guys to see. I started off with this massive enemy camp that pretty much blocks the entrance to the Zonai ruins. I was struggling, however, to make the massive skull that sits atop the tower, but luckily, Ombrains was around and she was able to get it done.
Sehr geil sieht das aus.
Some of the first ruins that I built up were the dragon head stone carvings. I forgot to record at first, of course, but I did remember in time to finish it off. Continuing along the road, there were a lot more of the snake-like dragon carvings, as well as some of the large towers that we built earlier. The path opens up a lot more further down the road, however, revealing these large stone walls embedded in the cliffs. These walls have a repeated pattern and also show up near the Spring of Courage. They also had large roots hanging down all over the top of them, which I used mangrove roots and wood for. In the area.
Mir geht gerade eine Sache nicht aus dem Kopf, Freunde. Und zwar erinnert ihr euch noch an Part 1, wo er diese gesamte Map gebaut hat. Er hat sich ja die BOTW-Map genommen und damit ein Programm daraus das Höhenprofil erstellen lassen. Und dieses Höhenprofil dann in ein Programm gepackt, was daraus eine Minecraft-Welt erstellt. Wenn das nicht von Anfang an so gut funktioniert hätte, wäre dieses ganze Projekt einfach nicht möglich. Oder er würde permanent auf Probleme stoßen, weil die Map nicht groß genug ist. In diesem ersten Part, wo er sich diese Grundmap erstellt hat, die wir jetzt hier sehen, ne, die ganzen Berge, das hat er einfach in dem Programm gemalt und daraus wurde dann das Höhenprofil erstellt. Wenn das nicht funktioniert hätte, wäre dieses ganze Projekt down. Also er hat einfach in diesem ersten Part, in diesen ersten 5 oder 10 Minuten, wo er diese komplette Map mit dem Höhenprofil hat erstellen lassen, den Genius-Move seines Lebens gebracht, weil ansonsten wäre das Gesamte, was er jetzt hier macht, nicht möglich, weil er all das auf dieser Grundmap aufbaut. Und das geht mir gerade nicht aus meinem Schädel, was er damals für einen ultra smarten Move gebracht hat, dass er mit diesem Höhenprofil sich die Map hat erstellen lassen. Krank.
Well is one of the large enemy encampments that is posted up on a tree. But this one was a new variant exclusive to the Farron region. This same design is duplicated all across the Farron region, and there's even one on Eventide Island, which you'll see later. As the path to the river begins to thin out, there are a lot more of the dragon head carvings looming over the road. These were all the same design though, and they were copy-pasted everywhere in Breath of the Wild, so the only thing that I was really changing about them was how ruined they are compared to the others. The river itself also has many of these hanging above, some of them even breaking away and falling into the river. At the end of the river, there are 2 wooden bridges that connect the path to the other side of the lake, with the land across acting as the home to the Spring of Courage. The same large walls that we designed just a moment ago also show up here. Similar to the one we built before, these walls also have the large roots hanging over them.
Wie viele Drachenköpfe es hier einfach gibt.
As a lot of you probably know, the entrance to the Spring of Courage is a massive dragon head. This was certainly not going to be an easy build. Logically, I started with the jaw while I attempted to figure out the proper scale for this build. The teeth were pretty weird to make, and in general, the early bits were quite a struggle. I'm sure that you can see as we progress on the snout that there was a lot of trial and error for this one. Luckily though, Sierra and Goat were there to help me. We continued to progress on the dragon, adding the large swirls that line the back.
Die Haare oben sehen ultra fett aus. Da erkennt man, durch diese Locken da oben erkennt man direkt, was es sein soll.
But after we finished the first half of the head, it got a lot easier and there wasn't as much to do along the backside. This was quite an interesting build because I almost never build dragons, or large stone statues for that matter. It's not a skill that I thought I had, I wasn't sure I'd be able to pull it off, but I think in the end it looks pretty good.
Ja. Sieht
But
sehr fett
there
aus.
is still one part of the dragon we have left to build. On either side of the dragon head are two massive claws, and if there's anything that artists have taught me, it's that hands are not easy to make. But thankfully, by some miracle, I was able to construct the claws with almost no difficulties. Somehow, I was just able to make the claws look great on my first try. And
Geil.
luckily, the two claws are identical. I was able to just copy-paste this claw to the other side and only had to make minor changes to it.
Geil.
And
Sind nicht in den
finally,
Klauen
it-
sogar Truhen drin? Ich meine mich dann irgendwas zu erinnern.
Time for the actual Spring of Courage. Behind the dragon head, I carved out the small pond and the pedestal that the goddess statue sits upon. For the goddess statue itself, I was able to reuse the one that I built at the Temple of Time.
I forgot to record the building for the structure behind it. Okay.
And to end off the Zonai ruins, I did a bit of texture variation, adding a lot of cracked and mossy stone brick to the mix, along with some tough and cobblestone to give it all some darker patches.
Na, aber merkt ihr, das ist das, was ich gemeint habe, wie lange er jetzt einfach nur an diesem Drachenkopf und an dieser Quelle sitzt, während er davor einfach ein komplettes Mapgebiet innerhalb kürzester Zeit gemacht hat. Also es fließt teilweise so viel Zeit einfach bei diesem Projekt in nur einzelne kleine Orte, während man teilweise riesige Mapgebiete innerhalb eines Fingerschnipses quasi fertigstellen kann. Es sind wirklich immer nur diese besonderen so Points of Interest, die so viel Zeit brauchen.
And finally, to finish off this area, it
Oh,
was
jetzt kommen
time
die
to
Bäume.
put in place all of the trees that we built earlier. And this final step really brought the whole build together. I am just so amazed with how well this turned out. This area quickly rose to potentially my favorite spot that we've built so far.
Sieht echt fett aus. Die Bäume machen alles aus. So. Das ist ja einfach dieser
Continuing
Riesendschungel.
east along the path, we are quickly approaching
Ah, jetzt kommen die
Lake
Wasserfälle.
Floria.
Oh, genau, das meine ich. Und hier gibt es einen Spot, wo es super viele Truhen gibt. Und das weiß ich eben wegen der Randomizer.
The place that the great dragon Farash often wanders in. Before we can get far east to work on Lurelin Village and Eventide Island, we first have to finish this region. After finishing the Zonai ruins, I began to extend the jungle farther east. What we just built around the Zonai ruins is only a fragment of the entire jungle. As I put all of the trees in place, Sly worked on one of the bridges along the path, while Toby terraformed the riverbed. Goat was also helping to build more of the Zonai ruins
Krass, die bauen da gerade zu viert dran, ne?
along the path. The Zonai ruins extend all the way to Lake Floria. They just become more sparse the further you get from the Spring of Courage. I was also helping to build some of the ruins, constructing the first of the owl statues. There are many of these owl statues scattered throughout Lake Floria,
Oh, stimmt,
despite
ja, die
none of
gibt's
them
auch noch.
being near the bulk of the Zonai ruins. The statue turned out pretty well. It doesn't necessarily look like an owl, but on this scale, it's kinda hard to replicate that. Far up on the cliffs above is the Farron Tower. This tower is sprinkled with a bunch of small-scale Zonai ruins, but none of them are that crazy. Most of it is either copy-pasted from a previous spot, or is something pretty small that's not really noteworthy. A little ways down the hill are some more unique ruins though, but really they're just kind of small-scale versions of the walls that sit beside the Spring of Courage. Just to the east, however, we make it to the lake region. This place is well known as the home of Farash, and for the many great waterfalls that tumble down into Lake Floria. You may notice as I begin to
Ey, diese riesigen Wasserfälle, ne? Sie sehen so mächtig aus. Ich liebe
clean up the
es.
terrain and put the waterfalls in place, that the nearby cliffs are all red. Similar to Lineru's blue cliffs in the last episode, the cliffs surrounding Lake Floria have a red
Es sieht so
tint
mächtig
to them.
aus.
Toby, Ombrains, and I decided on a palette that includes blocks like stripped acacia wood, brown mushroom blocks, and terracotta. On the other side
Wahnsinn.
of the lake is another stable, which is surrounded by more Zonai ruins. However, most of it is torn from the ruins we've already made. A lot of the Zonai ruins are just copy and pasted. Which becomes very relevant for these next couple clips. There are many Zonai structures and enemy encampments scattered all across these red cliffs. But none of it is significant enough to spend much time on. Again, a lot of it is just copy and pasted from earlier. So here are a few wide shots of me putting in most of it. I also noticed that the lake was missing a bunch of its smaller islands. So I quickly put those in place, which really were just rocks that barely poke above the water. Finally, we have to build the very large curved bridge that crosses the lake.
Das ist wirklich eine kurvige Brücke? Ich bin gerade die ganze Zeit, während ich das schaue, so voll am Überlegen, boah, wie sah das aus? Ich weiß nicht warum, diese Gegend ist einfach komplett aus meinem Gedächtnis gestrichen. Was ist hier los?
This was a bit of an interesting build, because not only is it the first bridge we've built in this map that sort of curves, but it also changes in elevation as it goes along. It was still pretty standard though until we got to the support beams. The bridge is held up by 3 large, ancient trees. For some reason, I really
Was, die Brücke wird von alten Bäumen getragen? Ich weiß das nicht mehr!
It took 2 or 3 attempts to get the tree trunk to look right. Mostly because the trees have very large roots which scatter in all directions, but those are kind of hard to implement on this scale. But eventually, I got a pretty good draft. So, after finishing up the trees, this region is pretty much done. Except for the trees, of course. We still have to put those in place. Similarly to the Zonai ruins, this whole
immer wenn diese
area
Bäume reingecopy-pasted werden, sieht so heftig aus.
came together as soon as the jungle was put in place. I'm very glad that I
Boah,
waited
wie
to
das
put
aussieht! Ey, sobald du überall diese Bäume hinplatzierst, sieht es einfach nur so übertrieben sick
in the
aus.
trees until the end because
Und an die Brücke erinnere ich mich immer noch nicht.
wow, it just completely changes the area. Wait a minute. Aren't I forgetting something? Oh yeah, we still have to build Farash in its new home. In all my years of playing Minecraft, I only ever built 2 dragons, and both of them sucked. So Farash was going to be quite the challenge for me. But luckily, I had Goat here to help me alongside Hyrath, who built all of Nadra in the last episode. Choosing a block palette for Farash was pretty challenging. I was very worried at first that the white would not look good in the end. But
Was verwenden die da? Ich glaube Wolle, Birkenholz und ich weiß gar nicht, was das dritte ist.
we stuck with it, and that ended up being the right decision. While Hyrath was working on Farash's underbelly, me and Goat were working to put in all of the glowing green spikes that stick out of Farash's back.
Boah,
This was
sieht
when
das
I
geil
first
aus.
began to truly appreciate frog lights, because being able to use a green light block in this build was very helpful. After that, Hyrath began to work on Farash's head, using the head of another dragon that he built as a base for it. Farash has a sort of stone gray snout with purple eyes, and a large green horn. The horn you see now would later be changed to better match a green color. As he finished up the head, I began work on the legs, which were a real pain. Getting the length and angle of them was very tough, but luckily Hyrath was there to give me plenty of pointers on how to make them look right. Finally, once the legs were finished, I began to add in a lot of the glowing green veins that cover Farash's body, while Hyrath stitched the head onto the
Boah,
body.
sieht das fett aus!
I think we did a good job. I was very worried about the white block.
Boah! Was ein geiler Screenshot. Damn, boy. Und die haben sogar so kleine, seht das, überall so kleine leuchtende Punkte gemacht. Das sind diese Blitzbälle, die er aussendet in seiner näheren
I
Umgebung.
at first, but wow, I think it turned out phenomenal.
Ja, es ist übertrieben krass.
Hair in my mouth. I'm just trying to do my voiceover. Get out. This episode is still far from complete. Further to the east, there's still a bunch of territory we need to build up, including Lurelin Village and Eventide Island. Let's build our way to Lurelin Village and end off the episode with Eventide Island. First up on the road is the Three Brothers Shrine Quest. If you
Stimmt, das
recall,
sind diese 3 Hinoxe.
there's a shrine quest in Breath of the Wild that requires you to steal 3 shrine orbs from 3 Hinoxes. As you can see, I built up the shrine area first with the large ribcage coming out of the ground behind it. We already built these kind of bones in the last episode at the Lanayru Tower, so I was able to just reuse those here. I put the Hinoxes in place and all of the bones surrounding them, along with their own lakes and trees.
Geil.
Oh, and by the way, when I say first thing on the road, I mean the last thing on the road. This is pretty much the only significant thing between Lake Floria and Lurelin Village.
Das ist so krass, wie leer BOTW teilweise ist. Aber es fällt einem beim Spielen nicht auf. Also,
There were a couple shrines and enemy camps that I had to put in place. and this very large overhanging cliff, which I learned something very funny about. This giant overhanging rock you saw me just put in place is completely stolen from Hateno. Obviously, Breath of the Wild is going to reuse some designs like the Sheikah Towers, some ruins, but I did not know until I was building this that they literally reused entire cliffs. They do it on the beach as well. Speaking of the beach, however, there is still a lot of work to be done to them. Before we begin work on Lurelin Village, we need to build up the palm trees for one thing, but the water's edge is also scattered with enemy camps. I've never really built any large-scale palm trees
Ich
before.
liebe diese Ebene. Ne? Auf dieser Ebene bauen sie sich ja quasi so Copy-Paste-Paletten, ne? Also quasi von Objekten, die sie häufiger brauchen. Und es sieht wirklich aus wie eine Malerpalette. Kennt ihr so Bob Ross, der da so seine Malerpalette hat, wo er so seine Farben drauf hat und er dann malt? Exakt an das erinnert mich das. Oh, dann nehmen wir hier noch einen Wächter, dann nehmen wir da noch einen Schrein. Das ist so cool.
So this was kind of a first for me. My first attempt was not going too well, as you could see. I did not like it at all. So the next day I came back to try again. Slowly, each attempt was getting better, and this time Monoshish came along to help me with the trees. We each built our own tree, but worked together to build the third one with Goat.
Wie viele Palmen sie
I
einfach
began
bauen,
to
ne?
scatter the palm trees all across the beach, stretching all the way from the Necluda Sea to the Farron Sea. But it's over such a wide area that I can't even show you guys in replay mod, so here's just the raw footage of me putting it all in place. The shoreline is also scattered with a bunch of large dark rocks, so I went along the entire shoreline adding in a bunch of these. Upon some of these rocks were large enemy camps, which, if you recall, these are copy-pasted from earlier by the Zonai ruins. Finally though, with all else finished, it's time to work on Lurelin Village. This beachside village is a fan favorite to many, however it is also very small. There is not much to build here. As I began to lay out the buildings for Lurelin Village, Monoshish began to work on some of the docks while Goat worked on the entrance gate.
Es ist so cool, dass sie das jetzt mit mehreren Leuten machen. Ne? Als das am Anfang ja alles alleine gemacht hat, dachte ich mir so, alter Bruder, willst du das wirklich alles alleine machen? Aber jetzt, wo sie da so ein bisschen im Team dran bauen, ist es einfach voll geil, wie an allen Ecken und Enden immer irgendwo was aufploppt. Das macht mega Spaß zum Zuschauen.
As you can see from the layouts though, there are not many buildings in this village, and most of them are identical to each other. There are only 3 unique house designs in this village. It wasn't long before I got started on the first of the houses, using a mixture of different wood blocks like dark oak, spruce, jungle, and even a slight bit of acacia and birch. The coolest part about these buildings, in my opinion, are the palm trees that stick out of the roofs. I don't know why, but it was just so cool to be able to put the palm tree in place when the house was done.
Das sieht echt geil aus. Die Bäume machen wirklich viel aus.
This design is the most common in the village, appearing 4 separate times. So after finishing the first, I copy and pasted it into all of their locations. Jumping into the second house design, this one is a lot different from what we just made.
Das ist dieses ganz schlimme Haus. Oh, das ist dieses ganz schlimme Haus. Da muss man einen Stein mit Octorok-Ballons auf das Dach bringen. Ich glaube, das ist dieses Haus. Es ist so ein Krampf. Es ist so ein unglaublicher Krampf.
It's almost shaped like a... I don't know. I'm not even gonna try and guess what shape this is. Its roof is very curved with 2 palm trees sticking out of this one instead of just the one, and overall I'm happy with how this design turned out. Jumping inside, me and Goat finished out the interior for this building. I did also make the interior for the other house we made, but it was pretty small and not very noteworthy. Moving on to the final house design, this one is sort of shaped like a boat.
Oh nee, das ist es. Ich glaube, das ist das Haus, wo man den Stein hochbringen muss.
Infamous for having the very difficult Korok puzzle on top of it.
Ja.
Really guys, it's not that hard. I used an octo balloon and it took me like 20 seconds. You guys are making it more difficult than it is. This build was...
Okay, Bruder. Okay. Wir direkt sagen, ja, also wenn ihr da Probleme habt, dann bin ich besser als ihr. Das gibt ein Dislike.
It's quite interesting. Me and Toby worked on it for about 2 hours. Because it was built at a 45-degree angle, it was pretty challenging to get the ship shape done properly. As I begin to work on the interior of this building, you can get a few glimpses of the banners that Goat designed. As it turns out, she's like a master at making banners, so she was able to make very accurate banners for this village.
Stimmt, da ist dieses Truhen-Minispiel drin.
is the gambling room and is packed full with books and other small trinkets. Moving back outside, all of the buildings for this village are done. Goat, Toby, and I began to work on a bunch of the smaller details, including barrels, benches, trees, pretty much everything else. We finished up the docks, all of the entrance gates, and the small boats around the area, including the large pen, which I didn't even know was here until I built this. To finish off Lurelin Village, I mixed in a bunch of grass with the sand, as the area around here is actually fairly grassy. Or should I say, grassy. Please don't unsubscribe. Finally, we made it to the final stop of the episode, Eventide Island.
Der Witz könnte von mir kommen.
Small island in the far corner of the map, with some enemy camps, ruins, and a Hinox. I first began to clean up the island a little
Wie
bit,
groß diese Insel einfach aussieht in Minecraft.
changing the stone colors, adding in some sand, and putting in trees. But of course, in typical Grazi fashion, I forgot to record me putting in place most of the trees. All of the builds here were pretty small though, as the enemy tree camp is copy-pasted from earlier in the Farron region, as the same with the Hinox. Everything else was pretty minor, like a campfire on the beach, and a feasting spot on a small hill.
Wobei da oben auf dem Berg muss jetzt auch noch ein großes Gegnercamp hin.
There were some ruins higher up the island though, but there wasn't anything that special about them. I also put in the shrine way up on the top of the island. In this final shot, I began to put in a lot of the tall grass and flowers around the island, and despite this island not having too many builds on it, I still think it turned out really pretty. I really like this island.
Ja, sieht gut aus.
But with the island finished, we have completed the Farron region.
Echt jetzt? Komplett? Aber wollt ihr nicht den kompletten südlichen Bereich machen? Ist da aber nicht noch an der Seite, rechts ganz an der Seite, riesige Berge und alles? Und das... Hä, da fehlt doch was, oder bin ich jetzt dumm? Oder hat er am Anfang das falsch auf der Karte markiert? Bin ich jetzt hohl? Wir gucken da gleich nochmal nach. Ich meine, es sieht geisteskrank aus, aber wir gucken dann gleich nochmal. Ey, ich liebe diese Shots am Ende immer, ne? Ey, irgendwie kackt grad die Bitrate rein. Aber wir schauen doch auf höchster Qualität, oder? Ja, wir schauen auf höchster Qualität. Mann, es sieht gar nicht so schön aus, wie es aussehen könnte. Ah, der Drachenkopf ist fett. Das sind die Zwillingsberge hier unten, ne? Ja. Warte mal, jetzt, ja. Da, hier hinten, ne? Hier auf der Seite. War das in einem anderen Video schon drin? Irgendwie habe ich das Gefühl, da fehlt was. Aber ich vertraue ihm einfach. Er wird das schon richtig machen. Boah, der Drache sieht auch ultra geil aus. Und BOTW-Musik, die wenige, die sie hat, zieht auch immer. Das ist immer die Trailer-Mucke, ne? Immer wenn BOTW-Mucke genutzt wird, immer die Trailer-Mucke, weil es die einzige verwendbare ist. Boah, jetzt nochmal Hateno hier. Krass, krass, krass. Ich glaube, das muss auch beim Videoschneiden so befriedigend sein, ne? Wenn du deine ganzen Bauten mit dieser fetten Mucke siehst. Aber da sieht man mal, wie leer das Spiel teilweise ist. Aber es ist auch okay. Also, das wäre viel zu schlimm, wenn überall was wäre, weil nur dadurch fühlen sich diese Points of Interest auch wirklich, ja, interessant an, ne? Weil du... Die Welt hat nicht überall spannenden Stuff so. Du musst doch teilweise einfach mal über große Berge und Wiesen laufen, um zu neuen Orten zu kommen. Also, das ist jetzt gar nicht negativ gemeint, aber das Spiel ist sehr leer.
Out the entire bottom right corner of the map. This area of the map has quickly become one of my favorite places we've built so far. In the next episode, we will move back across Lake Hylia, tackling the Gerudo region and completing Divine Beast Von Naboris with
Das wird krass, aber ich glaube, die Wüste allgemein zu bauen, wird, glaube ich, super simpel.
Gerudo Town. So, you should definitely subscribe if you don't want to miss that. For the rest of this...
Natürlich solltet ihr Grazi abonnieren. Und wenn ihr dann noch neben dem Originalvideo sehen wollt, wie ich ab und zu mal meinen richtig dummen Senf dazu gebe, könnt ihr natürlich auch mich abonnieren.
Series, I plan to loop counterclockwise around Central Hyrule before moving in to complete Hyrule Castle for the final episode. If all goes according to plan, we will finish this project by the end of the year. So far, there has been a 3-month-long wait for each episode, but for the rest of the series, I plan to shave that down to 2 months by increasing my productivity. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.
Oh Bruder, jetzt sagt er will es bis Ende des Jahres geschafft haben, aber solche Projekte, das ist, man darf nie die privaten Probleme vergessen, die immer so reinkommen, wenn man so große Projekte macht. Man wird krank, man hat andere Prioritäten. Gucken wir mal. Also laut ihm kommt die nächste Episode in 2 Monaten. Ich freue mich sehr drauf. Falls ihr jetzt noch die anderen Regionen sehen wollt, ich verlinke euch hier oben einfach mal den letzten Part, Episode 3. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Danke auch an meine ganzen Kanalmember für den Support und bis zu einem neuen Video. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen.